Section 1. The lights go down in Elmore. There is a painting on the wall of a bananas garage in Elmore, California. It hangs alongside dozens of others, each one depicting something that has already come true. A naked blue cat chased through a shopping mall. A fish boy kissing a ghost on Halloween. The Watterson family fleeing in terror as their town collapses around them. Every single painting on that wall came true because the banana who made them can see the future. And then one night, she finishes a new one and hangs it beside the others. And she notices something. A shadow standing behind her inside the painting. A dark figure she did not see when she was brushing the strokes. She turns around. And he is there later when she is being held captive in a warehouse on the edge of town. A one-eyed figure with a body made of television static demands that she paint the future. He needs to know what is coming. He presses her over and over, but every time she dips the brush and lets her hand move, all that comes out is static. Gray noise. Void. And when the blue cat and the goldfish finally find her, when they manage to knock her captor to the ground and rush to the easel to look at what she has been painting, she turns to them with glassy eyes and says something in a flat, distant voice that sounds like it is coming from the bottom of a well. But there is no future. The screen cuts to static. And that is the last thing Banana Barbara says before the series enters its final chapter. Hello and welcome back to Watterson Lore. I am glad you found your way here tonight. Settle in, get comfortable. Adjust the pillow however you need it. Let the room be as dark as you like. This video is going to take a while, and I mean that in the best possible sense, because the show we are talking about tonight is one that rewards patience. It rewards the slow, quiet examination of things that the daylight tends to skip over. Tonight we are doing something I have been building toward for a long time on this channel. We are going mystery by mystery, question by question, through the unsolved corners of the amazing world of Gumball. Not the theories that have easy answers, not the ones that can be dismissed in a paragraph, the ones that sit with you, the ones that make you lie awake at 2 in the morning, turning the pieces over in your mind, feeling like you are this close to something, but cannot quite name what it is. That's the amazing world of Gumball ran for 6 seasons on Cartoon Network between 2011 and 2019. It was created by a French-British animator named Ben Bocquelet, produced at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in London, and it aired in over 150 countries. It won BAFTA Children's Awards for Animation. It won an International Emmy. It developed a cult following unlike almost anything else in modern animation. And then it ended, not with a resolution, but with static, with a hole in the ground, with a character falling into nothing while screaming that nobody listened. For years, that was how it ended, and the fandom has been picking through the wreckage ever since. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball arrived in 2025 as a revival, picking up the threads left dangling at the end of Season 6. It answered some questions, but it created new ones. And the show's creator has said publicly that he has a theory about what Elmore truly is. A theory he will not reveal until the movie, which is still in development as of right now. So we sit here in the space between the cliffhanger and the answer, in the gap between the last episode and the film that has not come yet. And we examine what we know, what the show tells us directly, what it implies through visual language and recurring patterns, what the creators have hinted at, and what remains genuinely, stubbornly, beautifully unresolved. This is not a horror video. This is not a creepypasta rundown. This is something closer to a long night of sitting with a show that meant something to you and asking carefully what it was actually saying underneath all the bright colors and absurdist humor. Because if you look closely enough at the amazing world of Gumball, you will find that it has been asking the same questions humans have asked for centuries. Who am I? Why does any of this matter? What happens when it ends? And it asks those questions through a cartoon banana, through a boy made of television static, through a fish who grew legs because someone loved him enough. That is the miracle of it. That is why we are here. So, wherever you are watching this from tonight, I hope you are somewhere comfortable. I hope the temperature is right and the light is low and there is nowhere you need to be. Because we are going to take our time with this one. We are going to go slow and go deep and let the questions breathe. The lights are going down in Elmore, and the mysteries are waiting. If you are enjoying this so far, Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. Whether you are in your bedroom at midnight, on a couch on the other side of the world, or somewhere in between. I genuinely love knowing where these videos land. And if you have not already, hit subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Now, let us begin. Section 2. The World Built from Rejects, Ben Bocquelet and the Origin of Elmore. To understand why the amazing world of Gumball feels the way it does, that particular texture of warmth and wrongness, of humor wrapped around something unsettling, you have to understand how it was made. Because the making of it is one of the most interesting origin stories in the history of modern animation, and it feeds directly into every mystery the show contains. Ben Bocquelet was born in Paris in 1980 and grew up with a deep love of animation. He studied at the École des Métiers du Cinéma d'Animation in Angoulême, one of France's premier animation schools, before moving to London to begin his career. His first job was at a studio called Studio AKA, a British animation house known primarily for producing short-form commercial content. And there, over the course of roughly 3 years, Bocquelet did something that would eventually define his entire creative legacy. He failed. Not catastrophically, not in any way that ended his career or broke his spirit, but in the quiet, grinding way that commercial animation often demands, pitching character designs and visual concepts for advertising clients, pouring weeks of creative energy into ideas that the client would ultimately reject. Again and again and again. He has spoken about this period openly, describing it as a time when he won essentially no pitches. The competition was fierce, the briefs were corporate, and most of what he created ended up in a folder somewhere, unseen and unused. What Bocquelet did with those rejected characters, and this is the part that matters, was keep them. In 2007, Bocquelet left Studio AKA and joined a newly formed Cartoon Network studio in London called Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe. The studio was set up to develop original animated content for the network's European output, and Bocquelet was initially hired to help other creators shape and improve their pitches for the network executives. But when the studio opened the process up to internal pitches, when they said, essentially, that anyone who worked there could develop their own show, Bocquelet had an idea that was unlike anything else in the room. He would gather all the characters nobody had wanted. Every rejected design, every abandoned concept, every discarded sketch from every commercial pitch that had never gone anywhere. He would take all of those unwanted creative children and put them in one place. Give them a home. Give them a world. His original pitch was described as a show about rejected cartoon characters attending a remedial school. A place where the unfashionable, the failed, and the forgotten could exist together. A kind of animated purgatory for characters who had been deemed unworthy of their own projects, now sharing a space and trying to make something of themselves. The executives at Cartoon Network heard this pitch and had a simple, not honest reaction. It was too sad. They were not wrong. There is something genuinely melancholy about a show whose entire premise is built on the acknowledgement that these characters were never wanted. That their existence in any form is the result of rejection, of not measuring up to whatever standards the commercial world had decided were important. It is the kind of premise that could very easily tip from heartwarming into quietly devastating, and the executives could feel that quality in it. So Bocquelet revised. He restructured the concept as a family sitcom, kept the eclectic, mismatched visual aesthetic, kept the school setting, kept the wildly diverse character designs that made no sense next to each other, but framed it around a family rather than a group of strangers in a remedial school. From the Watterson family was born. A blue cat, a goldfish, 2 rabbits, and another cat, all living together in a fictional American suburb called Elmore. The character names are worth noting here. Nicole was named after Bocquelet's mother. Richard was named after his father. Aeneas was named after his sister. Gumball, the show's protagonist, was a representation of Bocquelet himself. He placed his own family inside this world he had built, from the discarded and the overlooked and the never chosen. That is an act of love, but it is also something stranger and more complicated. The act of embedding your most personal relationships into a universe whose entire foundation is rejection. And the last name he chose for them? Watterson. That is a name you should sit with for a moment, because it is not a coincidence. Ben Bockley named the family at the center of his show after Bill Watterson, the creator of Calvin and Hobbes, the American newspaper comic strip that ran from 1985 to 1995, and is widely considered the greatest piece of sequential art produced in the 20th century. Bill Watterson was famously reclusive, fiercely protective of his creation, and, most significantly for our purposes, he walked away from it voluntarily at the height of its popularity. He chose to stop making Calvin and Hobbes not because the strip was canceled, not because the audience had left, not because he ran out of ideas. He stopped because he decided he was finished. He wanted to protect the integrity of the work. He refused to license the characters. He refused to merchandise them. He stepped back from the spotlight entirely and simply existed. In the world of Gumball, that decision is almost incomprehensible. Because in Elmore, the choice to stop, the choice to go quiet, to step back, to decide you are done, is indistinguishable from ceasing to exist. If you are not performing, if you are not entertaining, if you are not maintaining your narrative function, the void closes in. Stopping means ending. Bill Watterson could stop making Calvin and Hobbes and still be alive, still be himself, still matter. The Wattersons of Elmore live in a universe where that kind of quiet dignity is simply not an option. Existence requires performance. Identity requires a role. And if you do not have one, the universe deletes you. Is this a deliberate philosophical statement on Bockley's part? Or is it a coincidence? Just a surname chosen in tribute to an admired artist? Bockley has not said explicitly, but the resonance is there. And in a show that is so dense with intentionality, so layered with meta-commentary about the nature of fictional existence, it is very hard to call something like this accidental. The mixed media visual style of the show grew directly out of this origin. Because all those rejected characters came from different projects, different styles, different artistic traditions, they naturally did not match each other. A character designed for a shampoo commercial would look nothing like a character designed for a children's book pitch. A puppet-style design would look nothing like a flat 2D vector drawing. So, Bockley leaned into the dissonance rather than trying to iron it out. The show would be deliberately incoherent in its visual language. Characters would be rendered in fundamentally different styles: 2D animation, CGI, stop motion, puppetry, live-action photography, and they would all exist side by side in a world built from real photographic backgrounds, primarily location photography from the streets and buildings of London. Bockley has spoken about being inspired by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the 1988 film in which animated characters live alongside real humans in a tangible physical world. He wanted Elmore to feel real enough that children would believe they could visit it. He wanted the show to have a physical weight that traditional flat animation often lacks. But there is something that comes through in the visual design that Bockley may not have fully intended, or that he perhaps intended more than he lets on. But when every character is rendered in a different style, when nothing in the world visually coheres, when a CGI dinosaur shares a classroom with a 2D cat and a paper bear and a living 8-bit video game character and an upside-down live-action chin, what you are creating is a world that is fundamentally broken. A world where the basic rules of visual reality do not apply, where things that should not exist next to each other are being forced into proximity by a premise that is itself an act of rescue, of collection, of refuse given form. Every character in Elmore carries, in their very appearance, the mark of having come from somewhere else, of having been designed for a different story, of not quite belonging in any single aesthetic tradition. They are all, in the most literal visual sense, out of place. And that quality, that visible wrongness, that beautiful incoherence, is precisely what gives the show its particular emotional texture. It is the quality that makes the humor feel precarious, that makes the warmth feel hard-won, that makes the darkness feel genuine rather than performed. Elmore was built to give rejects a home. But even inside that home, some of them are more at home than others. And the ones who are least at home, the ones who feel most visibly out of place, most obviously wrong, most clearly not quite right, those are the ones the show finds most interesting. Those are the ones whose stories go deepest. We are going to meet some of those characters tonight, but first we need to understand the force that governs them all. The mechanism that decides who stays and who disappears. We need to talk about the Void. Section 3. The Void. Elmore's Great Deletion Engine. The Void is introduced in the 12th episode of Season 3 in an episode simply called The Void. But like most of the show's most important concepts, it had already been present before it was named. If you go back and watch the first 2 seasons knowing what you know now, you can see its fingerprints everywhere. The absences, the things that do not add up, the characters who appear once and are never mentioned again, the spaces in the world that seem wrong without being obviously broken. The episode begins with a detail that is easy to miss on a first viewing. Gumball and Darwin notice that something is missing. They cannot immediately articulate what it is. It is more of a feeling, the way you walk into a room and know something has changed, but cannot place exactly what. Darwin opens his locker and finds lockers numbered 115 and 117 on either side, but no 116. There is a gap in the row, a space where something used to be and has been forgotten. They consult the school yearbook and realize that a classmate named Molly Collins, a girl they both vaguely, dimly remember, is no longer in it. Not only is she gone from the yearbook, she is gone from the photographs she appeared in. The pictures exist, but she has been removed from them. And nobody remembers her being there except for the faintest, most fragile impression. The kind of memory that crumbles when you try to examine it too closely. This leads them, with the help of their school counselor, Mr. Small, to the Void, a dimension that exists behind or beneath the reality of Elmore. A vast expanse of television static where the universe sends everything it considers a mistake. Obsolete trends, failed products, outdated ideas, and characters. Characters who were deemed too boring, too uninteresting, too lacking in narrative function to justify their continued existence. Molly was sent there because the universe decided she was uninteresting. Those are the stakes of the Void, stated plainly. Your existence in Elmore is conditional on whether you are interesting enough to remain. When Gumball and Darwin enter the Void to rescue her, they find a dimension that resembles a broken television screen. Fractured light, static noise, strange physics where gravity shifts direction without warning. Things sent to the Void are frozen, paused, suspended in mid-motion like a video on hold. The Void does not destroy them. It simply removes them from the world that was watching. And in the background of those scenes, if you are paying attention, standing near a prototype of the Watterson house that was also judged a mistake and discarded, there is a figure. A tall, thin cyclops with blue skin and auburn hair. He has been there for an indeterminate period of time. He sees Gumball and Darwin. He tries to get their attention, he calls out, or tries to, but they are focused entirely on finding Molly. They walk right past him. They do not notice him. They rescue Molly. They run for the exit. Mr. Small's hippie van, a vehicle called Janice that was also sent to the Void at some point for being a relic of a defunct counterculture. As Janice launches back through the portal to the real world, the Cyclops grabs the rear bumper at the last second, and the Void tries to keep him. It warps him. It tears at him. And by the time he clears the threshold and lands back in Elmore, he has been permanently disfigured. His body is now covered in static. His head is polygonal and glitching. He looks like a person who has been partially digitized, partially corrupted, partially consumed by the thing he barely escaped. His name, as we later learn, is Rob. And what happened to him in that dimension, the specific horror of being sent to the Void not because of anything he chose or did, but simply because the universe decided he was not important enough to justify keeping around, is the wound at the center of everything that follows. But let us slow down here because the mechanics of the Void are fascinating in their own right, and they tell us something essential about what Elmore actually is. But the Void is not presented as evil exactly. It has no voice, no personality, no agenda. It is more like a system, an automatic process, like a computer periodically clearing its cache, or a show's production team removing a character from the cast because the writers are not using them. The universe of Elmore has standards of relevance and entertainment, and anything that falls below those standards gets quietly removed. The universe does not mourn the removal. It does not announce it. It simply makes everyone forget, adjusts the photographs, and moves on. Think carefully about the implications of this. It means that every person currently walking the streets of Elmore, every student at Elmore Junior High, every resident, every employee of every business, every cloud and every banana and every sentient piece of toast exists in a state of conditional tenure. Their presence in the world is not a right. It is a privilege maintained by their continued usefulness, interest, or entertainment value. The moment they become irrelevant, the moment they slide below whatever invisible threshold the universe maintains, they are removed, forgotten, and replaced by the absence of themselves. That is not a metaphor. The show states this directly. The void is canon. The deletion is canon. The forgetting is canon. And the show plays most of this for comedy, which is, when you sit with it, one of the more disturbing choices in the history of children's television. But there's a detail in the Void episodes that tends to get overlooked in casual discussions, but becomes increasingly significant the more you examine the show as a whole. When Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small return from the Void after rescuing Molly, the Void reaches out behind them and takes something. It pulls their tinfoil hats, hats Mr. Small had made specifically to protect their memories, back through the portal. And in doing so, it erases their memory of everything they experienced inside. They forget the Void entirely. They forget what they saw there. They cannot warn anyone, cannot document it, cannot even properly recall that it happened. Molly is back in the world, but nobody remembers why she was gone or what was done to bring her back. The lesson does not stick. The trauma does not stick. Everything resets to normal. And the Void remains exactly as secret as it was before they ever found it. This is the show's first clear articulation of what will become one of its dominant themes, the reset. The idea that nothing in Elmore truly carries forward, that consequences evaporate, that growth is temporary, that the most profound experiences characters have are erased before morning. Now, there is a question worth sitting with here that has never been fully answered. The Void erases memories of itself deliberately, actively. It reaches back through the portal and takes those hats specifically to prevent the information from spreading. Which means the Void is not simply passive. It is not merely a dimension that receives mistakes. It has a vested interest in its own concealment. It wants to remain unknown. Why? What if the Void is simply a quality control mechanism, a cosmic editing process? There is no reason for it to care whether the characters know about it. The characters cannot stop it. They are fictional. The Void is the mechanism by which their fictional universe maintains itself. A character knowing about the Void should not, in theory, change anything. But the revival series, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, specifically its season finale episode, The Rewrite, reveals that the Void will destroy Elmore completely if any character discovers that their world is fictional. The mechanism of concealment makes sense when you understand this. The Void erases memories not to protect itself from attack, but to prevent the specific realization that would trigger total annihilation. Elmore exists as long as its characters do not know they are characters. The moment that threshold is crossed, the story ends. The Void consumes everything. This creates one of the most quietly tragic aspects of the entire show. The characters who are most drawn to questioning reality, the ones who notice the inconsistencies, the ones who feel the edges of the world pressing against them, the ones who ask why things are the way they are, those are exactly the characters whose awareness poses the greatest existential threat to everyone around them. The curious ones, the questioning ones, the ones who refuse to just accept that things are fine. In Elmore, that impulse toward understanding is potentially apocalyptic. There are things in the Void worth cataloging, because the show went to considerable effort to populate it with objects that communicate something about what the Void actually is. Alongside Molly and Rob, you can find scrapped concept designs for the Watterson's house, an early prototype that was ultimately rejected in favor of the design we know. Darwin's original CGI character model from the early development reel. Character models from a film called How to Ratatwang Your Panda, which apparently exists in some form within the Gumball universe but was deemed unworthy of release. A keytar, a pogo ball, a crazy frog-style frog, a disco shoe on a disco floor. Jupiter, labeled incorrectly as Pluto. which is a reference to Pluto's 2006 reclassification as a dwarf planet, its demotion from the list of official planets representing a kind of real-world void event, and a decision made by external authorities that something did not measure up. The void is, in a very literal sense, where everything that did not make the cut ends up. And the fact that it is populated with real-world scrapped production assets, actual discarded concept art from the making of Gumball, collapses the boundary between the show's fiction and its reality in a way that becomes increasingly significant as the series continues. What is in the void? Failed ideas, outdated things, characters no longer deemed worthy, and the bones of the show's own production history. The evidence of choices not made, paths not taken, versions of the world that existed briefly and then were deleted. The void is the slush pile, the recycle bin, the not good enough folder. And it is haunted by everything that was almost something. One final piece of the void's mechanics deserves attention before we move on. The show reveals across multiple episodes that the void is not static. It is not simply a holding dimension where things wait indefinitely. It is active, it grows, it wants. And at the end of Season 6, in the series finale, it begins consuming Elmore itself, cracking the floors of Elmore Junior High, swallowing the world from the bottom up, reducing everything to static and silence. The conditions for this are significant. The show had ended. The audience was gone. The signal had stopped. And in the absence of watching, in the absence of engagement, in the absence of an audience caring enough to keep looking, the void moved in. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Before we get to the finale, we need to spend time with the character who saw all of this coming, the one who figured it out years before the ending, the one who screamed about it and was ignored because screaming was the role he had been given. We need to talk about Rob. Section 4, Rob, the character who knows too much. There is a running gag in the amazing world of Gumball that runs for almost the entire series. Whenever Gumball encounters his arch nemesis, the glitching blue Cyclops covered in television static, he gets the name wrong. He calls him Rich, Roy, Raj, Rolf, Ron, Ross, Rose. Every one-syllable name beginning with R except the correct one. And the joke, if you want to call it that, is that Gumball cannot remember a basic fact about the person who is supposed to be his greatest enemy. The joke is also, if you think about it for more than a few seconds, one of the bleakest pieces of characterization in the show. Because Rob's entire story begins with being forgotten. It is the original sin of his existence. It is the wound that never fully closes. And the fact that even as Gumball's nemesis, even as the villain of the piece, the boy still cannot reliably remember his name, that detail carries more genuine sadness than most shows manage, with entire dedicated emotional arcs. Rob's story before the void is almost entirely constructed from absence. In Seasons 1 and 2, he appears in background shots at Elmore Junior High. He is at parties. He is in crowds in the hallway. He exists in the peripheral vision of the show, exactly as the universe considers him, not important enough for a storyline, not interesting enough for development, and not significant enough to remember. A tall blue Cyclops wearing red shorts and an orange sleeve shirt, present in the world of Elmore, but never quite in the story of Elmore. There is one moment in Season 2 in an episode called The Pony where he speaks. He greets Gumball and Darwin enthusiastically on the sidewalk, in the manner of someone who genuinely believes they are friends. And Gumball and Darwin do not know his name. They try to remember it, cycle through wrong guesses, and Darwin, solving the social discomfort in the way that feels most efficient, kicks him down a manhole, not cruelly, not with malice, just with the particular thoughtlessness of people who have decided, without consciously deciding, that someone in their periphery is not important enough to be genuinely careful around. Rob falls into the sewer. They move on. Now the episode continues. This is the first thing we ever see happen to Rob. Before the void, before the disfigurement, before the amnesia and the revenge and the meta-awareness and the tragedy. The first thing that happens to Rob in the entire series is that a boy he considers his friend kicks him into a sewer because his name was not worth remembering. We learn later, from Rob's own account in The Nobody, that he had no family. The universe had not assigned him one because he was not important enough to need them. He had no parents, no siblings, no people. He was present in Elmore the way a prop is present on a stage, filling necessary space, dressing the scene, giving the appearance of a populated world without actually being part of the story being told. And then the universe, apparently having calculated that even this minimal presence was more than Rob had earned, sent him to the void. He does not remember exactly when it happened. He does not remember the specific moment of his erasure. He only knows that he ended up there, in the static, standing near a prototype house that had also been deemed a mistake, watching other characters come and go through the space while nobody came for him. When Gumball and Darwin entered the void to rescue Molly in Season 3, Rob was there. He saw them. He tried to reach them. The show frames this from a distance. You can see him in the background if you know to look for him, standing there, one hand slightly raised, as the group focused entirely on Molly and then ran for the exit. They did not see him. They did not try to see him. The mission was Molly, and Rob was not part of the mission. The moment they escape, he grabs the back of Janice and holds on with everything he has. And the void, in its mechanical, impersonal way, tries to keep him. It pulls at him, it distorts him, it corrupts his visual data and warps the structure of his body before he clears the portal and collapses into the real world, disfigured and amnesiac and alone. He hides. In the basement of the Watterson house, of all places, stealing food from the family that failed to see him in the void, living in the dark for months while struggling to remember who he was and why any of it mattered. His amnesia is not just a plot mechanism. It is the show telling us something real about what happens to a person who is told, by the most fundamental forces of their reality, that they do not matter enough to be remembered. They'll lose that external validation long enough, and the internal record becomes unclear too. Rob does not remember himself because the universe does not remember him. His sense of self was always, at least partially, borrowed from the acknowledgement of others. When Gumball and Darwin finally discover him in The Nobody, he sits down with them and tries to explain what he is. He tells them he is a nobody. He has no place in the world. There is nothing for him here. And he says this not with particular emotion, not crying, not performing distress, but with the matter-of-fact clarity of someone who has worked through the horror of a thing and arrived at simple acknowledgement on the other side. He is nobody. He has no place. This is just the situation. Gumball and Darwin, who are catastrophically well-meaning and equally catastrophically thoughtless, try to help. They survey the available roles in Elmore and discover that all the good ones are taken. The hero, obviously Gumball. The sidekick, obviously Darwin. The love interest, Penny. The class clown, Banana Joe. Every positive, stable, narrative-sustaining role in the world of Elmore is already occupied. The only unfilled role, the one vacancy in the world's character roster, is the villain. And Rob, whose entire life has been defined by having no role, who spent months in a basement trying to piece together an identity from nothing, who has been told by the very architecture of the universe that he does not matter, Rob takes it. He accepts the role of villain not because he wants it, not because he is drawn to evil, but because the alternative is another stretch of pure narrative vacancy. At least as a villain, he exists. At least as a villain, his name gets remembered. At least as a villain, there is a reason for the camera to find him. This is perhaps the most quietly devastating moment in the entire show. Not because it is violent or visually shocking, but because of what it reveals about the mechanics of identity in a world governed by narrative. Rob does not become a villain because of corruption or ambition or malice. He becomes a villain because the story only had one empty slot, and that slot happened to be the bad guy. His evil is not chosen. It is assigned. Rob then spends most of seasons 4 and 5 attempting to live up to this assigned role, and failing rather endearingly at it. He constructs elaborate traps that Gumball and Darwin evade by accident. He constructs, by his own account, 563 separate traps, every single one of which fails. The show even depicts him in the style of classic cartoon villainy, the bumbling, ineffective antagonist in the manner of Wile E. Coyote, which is itself a commentary. Because in cartoons, the bumbling villain who always fails is one of the most rigidly defined archetypes there is. Rob has not just been assigned the role of villain, He has been assigned the specific subset of villain that exists primarily to lose. But in Season 4, Episode 40, something changes. Rob acquires a device called the Universal Remote from the Awesome Store, a mysterious van in the mall parking structure run by an even more mysterious shadowy figure. So the Universal Remote is precisely what it sounds like. A television remote that controls reality. It can rewind time, it can pause the world, it can fast forward through events. It can change channels, which in the context of Elmore means something we will explore more fully in a later section. Armed with this device, Rob tears through Gumball's life in an episode called The Disaster. He reverses every good thing Gumball has. He separates him from Penny. He erases family members. He collapses the Watterson circumstances one by one, methodically and with growing desperation. And at the climax of this destruction, he tells Gumball the truth about himself, a confession that lands differently the more times you watch it. Rob never wanted to be the villain. He wanted to be the cute sidekick who gets his own plush toy. But he wanted to eventually get a spin-off show. He wanted to matter, and he wanted the specific kind of mattering that comes with being beloved. The character that people follow from story to story because they cannot bear to see the story without them. He wanted, in the most basic and human of senses, to be cared about. But in Gumball's world, in the literal show, in the literal story, the protagonist gets everything, and everyone else fills the gaps. And the gap Rob was assigned was the villainous one, and he is furious about it. Not with the performance anger of a cartoon bad guy, with the real, specific anger of someone who looked at the rules of their world and understood, completely and accurately, that those rules were rigged against them from the beginning. Rob is right, and the show knows he is right. So that is what makes this so uncomfortable to sit with. He is not wrong about any of it. Gumball is the protagonist. Everything does revolve around Gumball. The story is rigged in Gumball's favor. Rob was forced into villainy by the available narrative slots. His analysis of his situation is completely accurate. The show told us the truth through the voice of its villain. But there is more. The rerun, which follows the disaster, sends Gumball into the void after Rob, and Gumball, finally confronted with what Rob has been through, tries to save him. He reaches out. He feels genuine guilt. He makes a real effort to bridge the gap between them. And in that moment, Rob experiences something he has never had in his entire existence. Someone who knows what happened to him and cares about it anyway. Rob's response to this genuine act of kindness is to use the universal remote to rewind time. To undo everything. The destruction, the grief, all of it, but also to undo the reconciliation. The rewind means that Gumball will not remember any of it. Their moment of genuine connection, the one time in Rob's life that anyone tried to save him knowing the full story, is erased by the act of saving everyone else from the chaos Rob created. He sacrifices the one thing he wanted most, to be seen, to be understood, to have that understanding matter, in order to undo the harm he caused. He gives up the friendship to fix the destruction. And nobody will ever know he did it. Nobody will ever know what he gave up. The kindness is real. The sacrifice is real. And it disappears into a reset that wipes everything clean. This is what Rob's arc establishes long before the finale. He is capable of genuine heroism. He is capable of putting aside his own desperate need for recognition and doing the right thing when it counts. He simply does it in a universe that runs on erasure, where the right thing done in secret becomes, for all practical purposes, the same as the right thing not done at all. Later, as Season 6 approaches its end, Rob figures out what the void actually is. He comes to understand that the static, the forgetting, the deletion of characters and things, it is not just a cosmic quality control system operating in isolation. It is the end. When the show stops, when the audience goes away, when nobody is watching, when the signal dies, the void moves in and takes everything. Elmore is not just subject to the void as a fact of its internal logic. It is subject to the void because of forces entirely outside of it, forces that have no awareness of or concern for the people living inside. Rob, understanding this, does the only thing he can think of to save everyone. In the series finale, The Inquisition, he disguises himself as a school superintendent and infiltrates Elmore Junior High. He begins systematically transforming the students and faculty into live-action humans, real people who might presumably survive in the real world when Elmore is consumed. He is trying to smuggle the entire cast of a cartoon into reality. He is trying to save everyone from a cancellation none of them know is coming. Nobody listens to him because he is the villain, because that is his role. Well, because years of being assigned the antagonist position have meant that when he finally has something genuinely important to say, there is no credibility left in his name for anyone to believe him. Gumball and Darwin stop him. They win. And as they celebrate their victory over the guy who is trying to save them, the ground cracks. The void arrives. Rob looks at Gumball one last time. And then he falls. He is the first one to go. The character who spent the entire series trying to warn everyone is the first to be consumed by the thing he was warning about. Because of course he is. Because in a narrative built on the cruelty of narrative logic, that is exactly the ending Rob's role demands. He falls into static. The episode freezes. The credits roll in silence. And for years, that was how Gumball ended. The sequel series has since retrieved Rob from the void, given him a mentor figure in the Shady Man, and set him on a new path as the guardian of Elmore rather than its antagonist. In the rewrite, he falls into the void one more time, deliberately sacrificing himself again to protect Gumball and Darwin from discovering the truth about their world and triggering the very apocalypse he has been trying to prevent. He takes the blame for the show's plot holes. He lets himself be the villain of a story written to conceal the real story, so that his world can continue to exist. He has been saved from the void twice now, both times by the Shady Man. And by the end of the rewrite, he has been handed the Shady Man's van, his cloak, and his purpose. Rob is now the invisible guardian of Elmore, the character who cannot be acknowledged, cannot be celebrated, cannot be the hero, but who keeps the whole thing running from the shadows. He finally has a role. It is just one that, by its nature, cannot be seen. The only character in the entire show who ever wanted, desperately to be noticed, has become the one whose entire function depends on going unnoticed. Ben Bockelay has said in interviews that the Rob storyline was inspired by the idea of what it would mean to make someone feel like they do not matter. That the worst thing you can do to a person is to make them feel forgotten. He described Rob being kicked into a manhole in the pony as one of the cruelest things they could have done to a character. And out of that cruelty, they built the show's most complete and, in many ways, most human arc, because everyone at some point has felt like Rob, has felt peripheral. It has felt like the story is happening over there, to other people, and they are somewhere in the background trying to get someone's attention. Has felt like their feelings are valid and their observations are accurate, but there is no role in the current narrative for those feelings, so they get filed away under the wrong name and eventually forgotten. Rob is not the villain of the amazing world of Gumball. He is the show's truest mirror. And the mystery of him, what the movie will reveal about his origins, about his family, about why he was in Elmore in the first place, is one of the things I am most genuinely curious about. Section 5. Banana Barbara, the Oracle, and the Static Future. Before we go deeper into the families and the fracture lines running through each of them, there's a character who exists at the intersection of prophecy and tragedy and needs her own dedicated examination. Because Banana Barbara is one of the most quietly extraordinary figures in the entire show, and she operates on a level that most casual viewers never quite reach. Banana Barbara first appears in Season 3's episode The Shell, and the appearance is unassuming. She is a background presence, a banana woman living in a garage surrounded by paintings. The show does not call attention to the paintings in that first appearance. They are set dressing, texture, the visual detail of a slightly eccentric character in a world full of slightly eccentric characters. But if you pause that episode and look at what is on those garage walls, you will notice something wrong. One of those paintings, tucked in the upper left corner, now hanging slightly crooked, depicts Gumball naked in a shopping mall surrounded by a crowd looking directly mortified. That episode had not aired yet when The Shell was broadcast. The event depicted in the painting would not occur until The Oracle, a later episode in the same season. Barbara had already painted it, before it happened. The Oracle properly introduces Barbara's ability, following Gumball and Darwin as they stumble through a yard sale at the Banana family's house and discover what appears to be a collection of random, slightly amateurish paintings. But as they examine them more carefully, they begin to recognize events they know happened. A quest for a stuffed toy, a Halloween night, things from their own past, documented in paint before they happened, and hung on a wall where anyone could have seen them but nobody thought to look. The episode then pivots into a kind of light thriller as Gumball attempts to avoid the fate depicted in Barbara's newest painting, the Naked Mall incident, and everything he does to avoid it becomes the very chain of events that causes it to happen. The painting is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Gumball's attempts to escape the future draw him directly into it. At the end of the oracle, with the events of the painting fulfilled, the camera finds Barbara in her garage. She is working on a new piece. She finishes it, steps back, and we see what she has painted. The Watterson family, all 5 of them, running in terror as their world collapses around them. The void consuming Elmore. Darkness and static swallowing everything. She looks at the camera with an expression that is difficult to name. It is not horror. It is not grief. It is closer to the face of someone who has seen this before and is simply, patiently, waiting for everyone else to catch up. This painting is a direct match for the finale of Season 6. Barbara painted the ending of the show in Season 3. She knew it was coming for years. And she sat in her garage and worked on her paintings, hanging the future on the wall alongside the past, while her son told bad jokes at school and her husband took bubble baths and none of them had any idea. In the future, Season 6, Rob kidnaps Barbara specifically because he has figured out that she can see what is coming, and he needs to know. He holds her captive and demands that she paint the future. He is trying, in his own desperate way, to prepare for the void's arrival, to understand what is coming, so he can find a way to stop it, or survive it, or save the people around him. But every time Barbara dips her brush and lets her hand move, the canvas fills with static. Gray noise, the same visual language as the void. And she says it plainly. There is no future. There are 2 ways to read this. The first is simple and literal. The future is the void, and the void is static. And Barbara cannot paint the void because the void is the absence of narrative, and her gift is tied to narrative. She can see the story, but the story is ending, and the place beyond the story's end has no images to offer. The second reading is more complicated, and it connects to a question about Barbara's ability that the show never fully resolves. Is she predicting the future, or is she creating it? The future episode includes a scene where Rob, watching Barbara paint, realizes she is not merely depicting events, but altering them. When Barbara is alone at her easel and needs to communicate to her son where she is being held, she paints clues. And the clues work. The events she paints begin to occur. She creates a painted portal, and the boys fall through it. When Rob takes control of her brush, he uses the painting to reshape reality directly, drawing cracks in floors and transforming surfaces. Barbara's paintings do not merely predict the future. They participate in creating it. This raises a question about every painting on her garage wall. The naked Gumball painting, the Halloween painting, the painting of the Wattersons in the void. If Barbara's art is not just prophecy, but causation, if the act of painting something makes it more likely to occur, then Barbara has not been watching the future of Elmore. She has been writing it. She is not an oracle. She might be an author. And this connects to a fan theory that is genuinely compelling, even if it cannot be fully verified. Barbara's prophetic abilities emerged from her breakdown. She was a normal, functional, highly competent person before she worked at an Elmore corporation run by a boss, who overworked her into a mental collapse. After the burnout, she became the distracted, eccentric, seemingly absent figure we know, the one who gets lost in Christmas stockings and turns up in Japanese karaoke videos. And alongside that changed personality, the paintings began. Whatever happened to Barbara in that breakdown opened something. Some channel between her and the underlying logic of the world she inhabits. And what she saw through that channel, when she looked at the future of Elmore, was eventually nothing but static. She wears a bow on her head. This detail is mentioned once, almost in passing. The bow keeps her from literally peeling apart. Her mental collapse was physical too, apparently. The same event that gave her the ability to see the future also compromised her structural integrity as a banana. There is no healed version of Banana Barbara in the show. There is no episode where she recovers, where the bow comes off, where she returns to the competent person she was before. The gift and the wound are the same thing, and the show leaves them undivided. Like she is exactly as extraordinary and exactly as broken as she will ever be. The real mystery of Barbara, the one I keep returning to, Asayeki, is one the show sets up and never resolves. She has been painting the future of Elmore for years. Every major event in the show has been on her wall. She has been living with the knowledge of what is coming in a town full of people who are blissfully unaware, carrying the full weight of the story in her garage while the world goes about its business. What does that feel like? What does it cost to know? The show gives us the outcome but not the interior. We see the paintings, we hear the flat, eerie delivery of her prophecies. We do not get Barbara's experience of knowing, of watching events unfold that she painted months ago, of understanding that nothing can be changed, of carrying the static painting of the ending and not being able to tell anyone in a way they would believe. She is the show's Cassandra. And Cassandra's tragedy was never that she was wrong. It was that she was right, completely and consistently right, and the world was simply not built to receive that kind of truth. Section 6, Nicole Watterson, The Weight of an Entire World. Among all the characters in the amazing world of Gumball, Nicole Watterson might be the one whose darkness is most consistently softened by humor into something the show never quite lets you look at directly. She is framed as the competent one, the capable one, the backbone. The jokes about her are jokes about her competence taken to absurd extremes. She can break the sound barrier. She can win any fight. She can defeat large men with her cooking pot. The comedy of Nicole is the comedy of someone who is extraordinarily good at absolutely everything. But there is another story running underneath that, and the choices. An episode from Season 5 that consistently ranks among the show's most critically acclaimed installments opens it up carefully and does not quite close it again before the credits roll. Nicole Senecourt grew up in a household defined by contradictory pressure. Her father, Daniel, had a temper. The show depicts him with the casual, explosive quality of a man whose anger was always near the surface and did not require much to be triggered. Her mother, Mary, was a perfectionist of the most demanding variety, the kind of parent for whom nothing was ever quite enough, and every achievement was immediately qualified by the next standard that needed to be met. Nicole was pushed relentlessly, enrolled in every extracurricular activity simultaneously, expected to perform at the highest level in all of them at once, never given the space to be ordinary or average or simply done for the day. She left home in her late teens after her parents refused to approve of Richard, a boy she had fallen in love with who was, by any conventional measure, everything they would not want for their daughter. Gentle where they were demanding, unambitious where they were driven, content where they were restless. They did not come to her wedding. For over 20 years, they were absent from her life. Nicole's adult personality is a map of where she came from. Her rage, her perfectionism, her inability to relax. The episode, the painting depicts her literally going insane when asked to take a day off. Unable to function without a crisis to solve, her nervous system so tuned to constant emergency that the absence of emergency feels like freefall. The show frames this as comedy. Nicole needs stress the way other people need coffee. She is wired for maximum intensity at all times. But from a psychological perspective, what we are looking at is someone whose central nervous system was shaped in childhood by an environment of constant high-stakes pressure. She was never allowed to be imperfect. She was never allowed to rest. The home she grew up in trained her to live in crisis mode, and crisis mode became the default, the only mode she knew, the only register in which she felt competent and secure. She married Richard, gentle, passive, childlike Richard, and the easy interpretation is that she chose her opposite. The man who would never demand anything, never criticize, never push her toward standards she could not meet. After a childhood defined by impossible expectations, she found someone with no expectations at all. The deeper interpretation, which the show earns through years of careful character development, is that Nicole and Richard are genuinely in love. The Choices shows us this beautifully. A silent montage of their life together, from young adults eating ramen in a bare apartment to parents of 3 children in a house they built together. And the love is real in every frame. He did not become her partner because he was the safe choice. He became her partner because he was the right one for who she specifically is. But the psychological reality of the choice remains. Nicole carries everything. Every bill, every crisis, every decision, on every responsibility. The family's infrastructure runs on her competence and her willingness to keep going even when she is exhausted. Richard's gentleness and warmth and presence are real gifts to their children. But they do not pay the mortgage, and they do not manage the catastrophes, and they do not maintain the world that the Wattersons live in. Her combat abilities, which escalate to truly preposterous levels as the show progresses, energy blasts and earthquakes, and speeds that exceed the sound barrier, are not simply visual comedy. Within the logic of Elmore's narrative economy, power scales with function. Nicole is as strong as she needs to be because of how much she is required to do. She is the safety net, the last line of defense. If she stops being the strongest person in the room, the family stops having a room. And then there's the parents, a season 6 episode where Nicole's estrangement from her family comes to a head. The dialogue in that episode is among the show's most precise. Nicole describes her childhood not with screaming anger, but with the flat, tired clarity of someone who has processed a thing many times and arrived at a simple accounting of what happened. She was not given space to be good at just one thing. She was required to be good at everything simultaneously. And when she did not measure up, which was inevitable because the bar was designed to be unreachable, she was made to feel the failure as her own. The most important thing the parents establishes is that Nicole does not want to repeat what was done to her. Her parents' behavior toward her was wrong, and she knows it. And she has consciously chosen to raise her children differently. She loves Gumball and Darwin and Aeneas with a fierceness that has no conditions attached to it. Whatever pressure she carries herself, she does not transfer it to them in the same way it was transferred to her. This is the show's most consistently moving theme, the generational decision. The choice made every day to be different from what you came from. Nicole's rage is real. Her perfectionism is real. Her inability to relax is real. But her children are loved without condition, and that is not a small thing. That is, in fact, the thing. There is a fan theory about Nicole that circulates in the Gumball community and is worth considering carefully rather than dismissing. It suggests that Nicole's paranoia, her constant preparedness for disaster, and her inability to fully relax in a world that presents as safe, these qualities reflect an unconscious awareness that Elmore is not quite real, that the world she lives in does not follow ordinary rules, that she has always, on some level she cannot articulate, sensed the fragility of her surroundings. I do not know if this is true in any formal sense. The show has not confirmed it, but I find it emotionally convincing. Nicole is precisely the kind of character who would feel the edges of things that other people miss. She notices when things are wrong. She responds to signals that others ignore. If anyone in Elmore were going to feel the unreality of the world pressing against the back of their consciousness without being able to name it, it would be her. The alternate timeline in The Choices, where Nicole takes a different path and becomes a literal dictator, is played for comedy but carries an uncomfortable weight. Given her abilities, given her drive, given the combination of her parents' demanding natures boiled down into one person with genuine physical power, absolute control is not an absurd endpoint. It is the logical conclusion of someone whose entire life has been about survival through competence, arriving in a world with no check on her capabilities. She chose Richard instead. She chose love over ambition, connection over control, the difficult warmth of an imperfect family over the clean lines of power exercised alone. That choice made her the person she is, and the person she is carries the weight of that choice every single day. Now, in every bill paid, and every crisis managed, and every dinner cooked for a family that requires more patience than most situations warrant. Nicole Watterson is the backbone of Elmore not just because the show needs her to be. She is the backbone because the show understands with genuine clarity what it costs someone to be that. Section 7. Penny Fitzgerald and the Mystery of the Shell. For the first 3 seasons of The Amazing World of Gumball, Penny Fitzgerald was a mystery. Not in the dramatic, narrative mystery sense, not a puzzle to be solved, but in the quieter sense of a character whose interior life the audience could not quite reach. She was the anthropomorphic antlered peanut. She was Gumball's love interest. She was kind and warm and clearly felt deeply about him in return. But something prevented them from getting there, some barrier that neither of them could name or locate or address. The shell is a literal thing. It is the peanut-shaped exterior that Penny and her entire family, her father Patrick, her mother Judith, her sister Polly, her grandmother saw, wear at all times. They look like antlered peanuts because they are antlered peanuts, or so the show lets you believe for 3 seasons. And then, in the shell, a school play goes slightly wrong. Gumball accidentally headbutts Penny during an almost kiss moment, and the exterior cracks. What is underneath is not another peanut. What is underneath is a shape-shifting fairy, a being whose true form is inherently emotional, whose physical appearance shifts in real time based on how she feels about herself. When Penny is happy and secure and loved, she glows. She radiates warmth. Wings emerge. She looks like something from a Hayao Miyazaki film, luminous and strange and genuinely beautiful. When she is frightened or ashamed or certain that she is monstrous, her body reflects those beliefs. She transforms into the monster she fears herself to be. A dragon, a beast, a creature large and dark and capable of causing real destruction. Her father's immediate reaction to the cracked shell is fury and terror. He demands she be put back in the shell. He tries to have her transferred to a different school. He wants her contained, fixed, returned to the form he knows how to understand, and the form that the world knows how to receive. His love for his daughter is not in question. The show is careful about this, by presenting Patrick as a man genuinely trying to protect what he loves, rather than simply control it. But the method of that protection is, fundamentally, the erasure of who his daughter actually is. What follows is one of the most striking sequences in the series. Penny runs. She transforms over and over, each form a different facet of her fear, each shape an externalization of her worst beliefs about herself. The city treats her accordingly. Pest control is called. People flee. The world confirms every fear she has about what happens when you show people what you really are. And Gumball runs after her, not to fix her, not to calm her down, so she returns to a manageable form. He chases her through the city, yelling that he likes her, not in spite of her true form, not regardless of her true form, but because of it. He is not frightened. He is not performing bravery. He is genuinely, stubbornly insisting that the thing she has been taught to hide is the thing he is most interested in. She transforms one final time into the glowing fairy, the luminous version, the real one. And the series has its first official couple moment. The Shell won the Best Children's Series Award at the British Animation Awards in 2016. Ben Bockley has described the episode as Miyazaki-esque, and the references are deliberate and extensive. Penny's dragon form echoes Haku from Spirited Away, her wolf form echoes Princess Mononoke, and the general idea of a beast transformed by being truly seen borrows consciously from the Beauty and the Beast tradition while inverting it elegantly. Here, the beast is the protagonist's love interest, and the transformation is not from ugly to beautiful, but from hidden to visible. But the mystery of Penny does not end with the shell. It deepens. The Transformation, a Season 6 episode, explores what happens in the Fitzgerald family after Penny's breakthrough. Patrick is unhappy. He wants her back in the shell. Judith, Penny's mother, is caught between them. The family argues, and the argument is not presented as simple. The show is too honest for that. Patrick has a point, or at least a fear that the show takes seriously. The Fitzgerald family has been wearing shells for generations, and the Amadane from the Revival series finally tells us why. Granny Fitzgerald's revelation is this. The shells are not to protect the Fitzgeralds from the world. They are to protect the world from the Fitzgeralds. While the shape-shifting abilities are powerful and emotionally volatile, an uncontained Fitzgerald, feeling strongly enough, can transform into something capable of real damage. The shells have been passed down through generations as safety equipment, emotional containment suits, designed to keep the family's transformative nature from spilling over into the surrounding world. This is a more sympathetic reading of the family's behavior than the straightforward suppression narrative the show initially offers. They are not simply controlling Penny to conform to social expectations. They are genuinely afraid of what she might do uncontained. Their fear is rooted in something real, but the show holds both things simultaneously. The shells are protection, and the shells are prison. The fear is legitimate, and the fear is also used to keep a girl from knowing herself. Both things can be true, and the complexity of that duality is what makes the Fitzgerald arc more than a simple metaphor. It is not just about LGBTQ identity, though those parallels are there. It is not just about cultural expectations, though those are there too. It is about the specific and complicated truth that the people who cage you are often the same people who love you, and that their love and their fear and their control can all be the same gesture performed simultaneously. Penny is the first Fitzgerald in the family's history to break the cycle, to refuse the shell, to insist on being visible even when visibility hurts. She paid for that refusal with her father's rejection, her family's anger, her own terrifying freedom. And she stayed out. Now that decision, that daily, ongoing decision to remain uncovered, is the most radical act in a show full of radical acts dressed up as comedic chaos. There is a detail about Penny's forms that I return to regularly. Her appearance is not just a mood ring, it is a self-image ring. She does not transform based on how she feels about external events. She transforms based on how she feels about herself. When her self-perception is positive, she is luminous. When her self-perception is negative, she becomes what she fears. Her body is a running, real-time display of her internal relationship with herself. Imagine the vulnerability of that. Imagine going through a difficult day and having every insecurity immediately visible to everyone around you. Imagine not being able to school your expression, control your posture, but present a face that says fine when the truth is something harder. Penny cannot do any of that. Every feeling she has about herself is immediately legible to anyone looking at her. She chose to be legible anyway. She chose visibility over the protection of the shell. And in a show about the terror of being seen, that choice, small, personal, ongoing, made with no dramatic announcement, might be the bravest thing any character does. The unsolved mystery of Penny, the one the movie will presumably need to address, is this. What is the full extent of what the Fitzgerald family has been protecting the world from? The grandmother's revelation in the Amadane is partial, carefully partial. The shells have a reason beyond aesthetics and beyond social conformity. But the specific catastrophe they were designed to prevent has never been fully articulated. What would happen if an entire family of unshelled Fitzgeralds felt something strongly enough at the same time? We have seen what one Penny can do when frightened. What are the full limits of this ability? And if those limits are as significant as the generational commitment to containment suggests, what does it mean that Penny is out there, unshelled, every day? Section 8. Darwin's strange and unsettling origin. Darwin Watterson is, in many ways, the emotional center of the show. He is warm where Gumball is selfish. He is honest where Gumball is performative. He is optimistic when the world around him gives him very little reason to be. He is, in the language of narrative, at the moral compass, the character whose presence reminds everyone else of what is worth caring about. He is also, when you examine his origin with the attention it deserves, one of the most philosophically unusual figures in the show's cast. Darwin began as a goldfish, not a sentient one, not a particularly special one. He was one of several pet fish the Watterson family cycled through. The show implies earlier fish died, and Darwin was a replacement, a new fish purchased to inhabit the same bowl. He had no consciousness, no language, no inner life distinguishable from any other ordinary goldfish. He was a pet. The Origins, a Season 4 two-parter, depicts what happened to change that. One afternoon, when the fishbowl was being cleaned, Darwin suddenly spoke, the first sound he had ever made in any human sense, which startled Nicole and Richard so severely that they dropped the bowl. The bowl broke. Darwin was swept into the drain. He went through the sewers of Elmore and out into the wider world, and what followed was a journey that, if you watch it rather than simply describe it, is genuinely difficult to watch. Darwin crossed the city, on legs that had just appeared, breathing air with lungs that had just developed, without a map, without language, without any framework for understanding what the world around him was or where he needed to go. He was a fish who had just become a person, while simultaneously being trapped in a city that was not designed for either fish or newly minted persons. And in the animals and vehicles and people around him were obstacles and threats and sources of bewildering danger at every turn. He made it back. He walked back to the Watterson house on legs that had not existed that morning, and Gumball and the family were there. And the show, particularly in its more emotional moments, frames this as a love story. Darwin did not evolve for biological reasons. He evolved because Gumball loved him and refused to stop looking for him. The universe looked at a fish that a family loved with extraordinary intensity and decided that fish needed to be more than a fish. This is, on its surface, one of the most heartwarming things in the entire series. It is the kind of narrative that makes you feel good about love and loyalty and the power of caring about someone unconditionally. But sit with the mechanics of it for a moment. Darwin did not grow legs because of natural selection. He did not develop language because of gradual evolutionary pressure. He was transformed, abruptly, completely, without consent, from one kind of entity into another because the story needed him to be a character rather than a prop. The universe did this to him. The narrative logic of Elmore did this to him. Everything Darwin is, his kindness, his optimism, his moral clarity, his loyalty to Gumball, his tendency to be the voice of reason in a household full of chaos, was given to him. All at once, by whatever force governs the story. He was a goldfish. Fish do not have moral frameworks. Fish do not worry about whether they are doing the right thing. Fish do not experience love as a felt, considered commitment to another being's well-being. Darwin experiences all of those things, constantly and consistently. But where did they come from? Not from the goldfish. From whatever shaped him during that journey through the sewers, during that series of desperate evolutionary leaps driven by the story's requirement that he become a character worth following. Is Darwin's personality his? Or is it the personality the narrative assigned to him because the story needed a particular kind of sidekick? The show pokes at this question occasionally, and always from an oblique angle that allows it to maintain plausible deniability as comedy. In The Puppets, the crossover episode with Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, a genuinely strange creative decision that paid off in unexpectedly affecting ways. Darwin is the character who gets controlled by a puppet. And the puppet tells him something. It tells him he is not real, that he is just a character in a show. And Darwin's reaction is not intellectual engagement with the philosophical claim. It is terror. Primal, overwhelming terror. Because somewhere underneath the optimism and the moral clarity and the warmth, Darwin knows. He does not know what he knows, but the knowledge is there. There is a theory about Darwin that I find more compelling than any of the darker alternatives. The theory is not that Darwin is secretly malevolent or that his personality is a manipulation or that he would revert to a fish state if the narrative let him. The theory is simply this. Darwin is everything the story made him to be, and that is fine. And it is actually more than fine, and his goodness is real, and his love is real, and his presence in the world is worth exactly as much as it seems to be worth. But the question of what would have happened if he had grown up rather than been transformed remains genuinely open. The fish that Darwin might have been, if he had not been dropped and flushed and sent through the world in a crisis of survival, that fish does not appear in the show. We do not know what a naturally developing Darwin would have become. We only know the one the story made, and the story made him kind and loyal and good. And if those qualities were assigned rather than grown, they are no less real for being assigned. Now, unless you believe that identity only counts if it is self-authored, and if you believe that, you are faced with the somewhat uncomfortable question of whether any personality, in fiction or in reality, can fully meet that standard. Darwin's relationship with Carrie, the ghost girl who has been dead for an indeterminate but significant period, adds another layer to his story that I want to sit with briefly. Carrie is everything Darwin is not in terms of history. She has been in Elmore for what may be centuries. She cannot age. She cannot eat without possessing another body. She cannot touch the physical world the way Darwin can. She is a child who died and did not leave, trapped in the social world of middle school for what might be eternity. Darwin falls in love with her. and the show treats this with genuine tenderness. But there is a clock running underneath every scene they share together, and the show knows it, and it never looks directly at it. Darwin's clock is ticking. Carrie's stopped a long time ago. Darwin will grow, will change, will eventually move beyond Elmore Junior High and into whatever comes after. Carrie will still be in the hallways, still making dry observations from the corner of the room, still possessing classmates to taste a sandwich. Their love is real. And it is, by the nature of what they are, finite in a way that the show acknowledges only in the texture of their scenes rather than in any direct statement. Some of the most affecting things are the ones a show knows better than to say out loud. Section 9. The Shady Man, the Awesome Store, and the Hidden Architect of Elmore. The Awesome Store is a red van parked in the Elmore Mall parking structure. It is run by a figure who appears in shadow, eyes glowing, shape indistinct, voice odd, who sells items that should not exist and consistently refuses to take responsibility for what happens after the transaction is complete. He sells the universal remote that Rob uses to tear apart the Wattersons' lives. He sells the evil turtle that terrorizes the family for an entire episode. He sells a Game Child console that traps all of Elmore inside a video game. He sells a magical notebook that causes chaos when it falls into Sarah the ice cream cone's hands. Every major narrative-altering object in the show passes through the Awesome Store. Every MacGuffin, every reality-bending device, every item that drives the plot into territory it could not reach by normal means. It comes from the van. And the man who runs the van knew what it would do. The show is careful about this. He warns Rob when he hands over the universal remote. He tries to stop him. He explains that it is dangerously powerful and should not be used for revenge. Rob takes it anyway and deletes him from existence with it, which is the first clue that the Shady Man is more central to the show's mechanics than he initially appears, because he is revived when Rob rewinds time and proceeds immediately as though nothing happened. For most of the show's run, the Shady Man was a running gag, a joke about the kind of reality-warping merchants you find in fairy tales and old stories. The stranger at the crossroads who gives you something that will transform your life and does not tell you the cost. But the revival series revealed that he was always more than this. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball's season finale, The Rewrite, discloses that the Shady Man has been aware the entire time that the world of Elmore is fictional. He knows. He and Rob are the only two characters in the show who know consistently and clearly that they are characters in a cartoon. And the Shady Man's response to this knowledge has been to run a van full of plot devices from a parking structure, distributing narrative catalysts to the town so that things keep happening, so that the story keeps moving, and so that Elmore stays interesting enough to continue existing. Ben Bocquelet has described the Shady Man in interviews as beginning as a simple creative tool, a fun solution to explaining whatever the writers could not otherwise explain. Anytime the story needed a device, a mysterious object, an impossible thing to enter Elmore, the Shady Man brought it. He was functional before he was thematic. But something about him accumulated meaning over time. The show kept returning to him, kept granting him slightly more gravity, slightly more weight, slightly more suggestion of awareness. And by the rewrite, he has a cross-dimensional laptop and the ability to literally rewrite the script of the episode in real time, which he does, badly, creating plot chaos by typing things with no regard for internal logic, while Rob argues desperately that the rewrites need to make sense within the show's established rules. This scene, Rob insisting on narrative consistency, while the Shady Man types "and stuff" and causes the word "stuff" to physically materialize in the street, is one of the funniest in the revival series. It is also one of the most revealing. Because what it establishes is that there is a level of the show's reality that operates beyond the characters, where the actual text of the narrative can be edited by someone with access to the right equipment. And the person with that access has been running a van in the mall parking lot this whole time, selling mystery items to anyone who wandered over. The Shady Man, in the rewrite, retires. And he hands Rob his cloak and his van and his purpose. He has found a land of paradise, apparently purchased with the proceeds of decades of selling reality-warping items to the residents of Elmore, and he is going there. He wishes Rob good luck, and that is the last we see of him. There are questions about the Shady Man that the show has never answered, and the movie has yet to address. Where did he come from? He is described as being older, possibly very old. His van is called the Awesome Store, and the items inside it come, as the show has implied, from other dimensions, places beyond the reality of Elmore, places the characters cannot reach by ordinary means. How did he find those items? How did he build his inventory? What is his relationship to the Void, specifically? He saved Rob from the Void after the Inquisition, yet he clearly has access to dimensions beyond Elmore's usual scope. And his knowledge that the world is fictional? When did he acquire that? How? The fan theory that the Shady Man is the single most important figure in the show's metacosmology is difficult to argue against once you add up what we know. He is the distributor of plot devices. He is the one who saved the character responsible for eventually protecting Elmore. He has been operating in the knowledge that this world is a fiction since before any of our other characters were aware of it. And his departure at the end of the rewrite leaves Rob as the new keeper of the Awesome Store, which means Rob has inherited not just the van, but the role. The role of the invisible hand that keeps the narrative interesting enough to continue. The boy who was sent to the Void for being too boring to justify his existence is now the one responsible for making sure Elmore stays interesting enough to survive. There is a poetry to that which the show earns over 6 seasons and a revival, and it lands differently the more you understand everything that preceded it. But let us stay with the Awesome Store for a moment longer, because the items it has distributed across the series form a surprisingly coherent pattern when you lay them out end to end. The evil turtle, which terrorized the Watterson family and ultimately could not be returned because the store had vanished. The universal remote, which Rob used to bend reality to his will. The Game Child console, which trapped all of Elmore inside a video game. The magical notebook that gave Sarah the ice cream cone the ability to rewrite relationships between people. The mysterious refrigerator that pulled Richard into a nostalgic dream world of his memories. Every object from the Awesome Store does the same fundamental thing. It makes the narrative possible. It takes a situation that would, under ordinary physical and social rules, have no particularly interesting direction to go. And it introduces a device that forces the story somewhere new, somewhere the characters would never have arrived at without external intervention. In conventional storytelling, we call this a MacGuffin, a plot object. A thing whose primary narrative function is to drive characters into situations that generate story. But the Awesome Store frames this process as commerce. Characters purchase these items. They choose to interact with the van. And what they are choosing, in effect, is to introduce narrative disruption into their lives. To pay for chaos, to buy instability, to exchange something of value for the guarantee that something interesting will happen. Richard, specifically, is the Shady Man's self-described favorite customer. And Richard is the character the universe has designated as the cosmic anchor of Elmore's most dangerous tendency, the tendency toward stasis. Richard's job in the narrative is to not have a job. His function is to remain in position, to maintain his laziness, to hold down the couch with the dedicated intensity of someone whose entire purpose is to resist contribution. But Richard keeps going to the Awesome Store anyway. He keeps buying things. He keeps introducing chaos into the household through commerce with the most obviously dangerous vendor in the city. Why? The simple reading is that Richard is oblivious, that he never connects the purchases to the consequences, that his childlike nature prevents him from noticing the pattern. The more interesting reading is that some part of Richard, some deep and inarticulate part of him, is trying to be interesting, trying to generate something. He cannot work. The universe will not allow it. But he can buy things. And the things he buys have consequences. And consequences are a form of participation in the story, even if they are the wrong kind of participation, even if they bring the family to the edge of catastrophe rather than moving them forward in any constructive way. But Richard's relationship to the Awesome Store might be the show's most generous reading of his character. He is not simply passive. He is engaging with the one mechanism available to him for introducing dynamism into a life the universe has otherwise condemned to stillness. He is doing the only thing he can do, which is to let the Shady Man into his life and trust that something interesting will result. That something interesting usually results in property damage and near-apocalyptic chaos is simply the tax on existence in Elmore. There is also the question of where the Awesome Store's inventory comes from. The show has implied, without fully stating, that the items are sourced from beyond Elmore's dimensional borders, from other places, other realities, other versions of the world that may or may not exist in recognizable forms. Yet the universal remote clearly came from somewhere that understands the metafictional nature of Elmore, since it controls the show's own broadcast. The game child trapped everyone in a video game world with its own distinct visual logic. The magical notebook could alter the emotional reality of relationships in ways that felt more like editing character motivations than like magic in the traditional sense. What dimension produces objects like these? What marketplace is the Shady Man accessing? And what does it cost him to procure them? The show has never addressed any of this directly, but the consistent quality of the items, all of them somehow related to storytelling mechanics, to the tools by which narratives are structured and controlled, suggests that the Shady Man is not simply a magical merchant. He is sourcing his inventory from somewhere that understands what Elmore is, from somewhere that sees the show from the outside, which means somewhere out there, beyond Elmore's borders, there is a place that knows about Elmore. That sells items designed to interact with its specific kind of fictional reality. That has been doing business with the town for long enough that someone like the Shady Man could build an entire career around it. That question, what exists beyond Elmore's edges and what does it know, is one of the show's most carefully preserved mysteries. And it is one I genuinely hope the movie addresses, because the answer would reshape our understanding of every transaction the Awesome Store has ever made. Section 10. The Grand Unified Mystery. Is Elmore a TV show? What we have been circling this question for the entire video, approaching it from different angles, assembling the evidence piece by piece. Now let us look at it directly. The theory is this. Elmore is a television show within a television show. The characters are fictional beings whose existence is contingent on an audience watching them. The void is cancellation. The characters' behaviors, their chaos, their comedy, their refusal to be boring, are unconscious survival mechanisms designed to keep the audience engaged, and therefore to keep them existing. This is not emphatically a fan theory. The show confirms most of it explicitly. Rob knows he is a fictional character, and the show treats this as factual rather than as delusion. The universal remote controls reality like a TV remote. The void runs what appear to be end credits when someone is being ejected into it. The episode The Signal presents Elmore's reality degrading because the television broadcast signal is disrupted. The world itself glitches and skips like a poor satellite connection, and Gumball experiences this as his reality malfunctioning, not as a technical problem on someone else's end. The money shows the show's animation quality literally deteriorating alongside the Watterson's finances, as though the show's budget and the character's reality are the same object. The test shows the entire visual and tonal identity of the show, transforming when a different character steps into the protagonist role. And as though the specific camera language and humor register of The Amazing World of Gumball are calibrated to Gumball specifically and cannot be transferred to Tobias without the whole thing becoming wrong. The Inquisition, the series finale, has Rob trying to turn the characters into live-action humans so they can escape to the other place, presumably the real world, when Elmore is destroyed by cancellation. And the rewrite confirms explicitly that the void will destroy Elmore if Gumball and Darwin discover that their world is fictional. These are not hints. These are direct statements. The show's universe runs on the attention of an audience. The moment that attention withdraws, the moment the signal stops, the moment no one is watching, the void moves in. Let us talk specifically about the signal, not because it is one of the show's most important episodes, and one of the least discussed in the context of the meta-narrative. The premise is that Gumball and Darwin are going about their day when reality begins to glitch. Their sentences cut off mid-word. Scenes jump forward. Conversations loop back on themselves. They will be in one location and then suddenly in another, with no memory of the transition. The world stutters, skips, repeats. The genius of the episode is its explanation, which is offered without drama. The broadcast signal is weak. There is a bad connection between wherever the show is being transmitted from and wherever it is being received. The degradation of the signal manifests as degradation of reality itself. Gumball's reaction to this is instructive. He is not terrified, he is irritated. That he experiences the glitches the way you would experience a buffering video, as an inconvenience, a technical annoyance, something to be frustrated by rather than existentially destabilized by. And this casual frustration says something important. The signal has been unreliable before. The glitches are not new. Gumball has lived through enough reality malfunctions that they register as an ordinary category of bad day rather than as a fundamental crisis. Which means the signal has always been fragile. The characters have always been, without knowing it, one bad connection away from the kind of degradation that makes reality itself unreliable. They have been living on a frequency this whole time, and the frequency has always been uncertain. But the episode also establishes something about the nature of the characters' experience of their own continuity. When scenes jump forward, Gumball is not aware of the missing time. He does not notice the gap. The experience of a skipped scene from the inside is identical to the experience of normal life. You just proceed from wherever you are with whatever memories you have, and the absence of the intervening moments is simply not visible to you. The audience sees the skip. The character does not. This applies to the reset. Every time the show's episodic format wipes the consequences of a previous episode, the characters do not experience this as erasure. They experience it as continuity. They wake up and their world is as it was, and the trauma or growth or change from the previous adventure is simply not present in their memory. And they do not notice its absence because they have no access to what was there before. The reset is invisible from the inside. Only Rob, who holds memory across timelines, because of his void, disfigured nature, can perceive it. Everyone else just continues. Now let us apply this framework to some of the show's most interesting minor characters, because the grand unified theory of Elmore has implications that extend well beyond the main cast. Sarah G. Lotto, the yellow ice cream cone who is an obsessive fan of Gumball and Darwin, exists in a peculiar position within this framework. She is, the show tells us, a fangirl. She writes fan fiction about the main characters. She follows them around documenting their adventures. She inserts herself into their stories. She is, in the most direct possible terms, an audience member who has found a way inside the narrative. In The Fan, her behavior is presented as creepy and intrusive. The show is not entirely comfortable with the version of fandom that wants to get too close to the thing it loves, that does not maintain the necessary distance between observer and observed. But in The Test, Sarah demonstrates something that changes the context. She is the most narratively aware character after Rob, because she has been studying the story from the outside. She knows how sitcoms work. She knows what roles characters are playing. She can predict how narrative situations will resolve because she has been watching them long enough to understand the grammar of Gumball's world. The darker implication of Sarah, and it is dark, even if the show usually presents her with affection, is that she represents us, the audience, the people watching. And if the audience's attention is what keeps Elmore alive, if watching prevents the void from consuming everything, then Sarah is not merely a character in the show. She is a representation of the mechanism by which the show survives. Her obsession is the engine of Elmore's existence. Her watching keeps the signal alive. Without people like Sarah, without fans who care deeply enough to follow the characters through every episode, to document and analyze and discuss and rewatch, Elmore fades. The static grows louder. And the show's ambivalence toward her reflects a genuine ambivalence about this dynamic. You need the audience. You cannot survive without them. But the audience does not belong to the fiction in any formal sense. Their love is real, but it is love from the outside, looking in, and the power that comes with that position is not clean or simple or without its complications. There is also, in this framework, the question of Larry Needlemeyer, the character who holds 38 simultaneous jobs, who works every shift at every business in Elmore, who apparently never sleeps. The episode The Night establishes this not as hyperbole, but as fact. While the rest of Elmore rests, Larry works. He is always there. He is always on. The Void's logic is explicit about what happens to characters who are not useful. They get deleted. Larry's response to this threat, conscious or not, has been to make himself so comprehensively useful that deletion is impossible. With 38 jobs, he is not merely a person in Elmore. He is the functioning commercial infrastructure of the entire town. He cannot be removed without removing commerce, services, and the basic mechanisms of daily life for everyone around him. His strategy has worked. He has not been deleted. He has not been sent to the void. He is the most essential person in Elmore, and that essentialness protects him. But the price of that protection is that he never stops. He cannot stop. The moment he rests, the moment he takes a day off, the moment he lets himself be less than the infrastructure requires, everything becomes vulnerable again. He has purchased his existence at the cost of his rest. His safety is indistinguishable from his exhaustion. The episode The Pizza shows what happens when Larry snaps. He quits. All 38 jobs simultaneously, and society collapses. Elmore descends into chaos. The commercial infrastructure of the town fails because one man stopped working. The episode is a dark joke about how much of any society's functioning depends on the people least celebrated by it, the ones doing the unglamorous, necessary work that nobody notices until it stops. But in the context of the show's meta-narrative, it is also something more specific. Larry quitting is a test of the void's conditions. If the void deletes things that are not useful, and Larry makes himself maximally useful to prevent deletion, then Larry quitting is an experiment in what happens when the most useful person in Elmore decides to be less useful for a while. The answer, catastrophic social collapse, confirms the premise. Larry is not merely economically essential, he is narratively essential. Now, without him, the world cannot function. Without a functioning world, the story has nothing to work with. Without story, the void arrives. Rob and Larry represent the two extremes of the void's conditions. Rob was deleted for being irrelevant, for occupying narrative space without contributing to the story's needs. Larry has made himself so relevant, so comprehensively necessary, that the story cannot function without him. They are opposite responses to the same fundamental anxiety. The terror of having no role, no function, no reason for the universe to keep you around. Between those two poles, every other character in Elmore is navigating the same thing. They all have roles. They all maintain those roles with varying degrees of consciousness and effort. And when a character strays too far from their assigned role, when they become too different from what the narrative requires them to be, something usually goes wrong. The universe pushes back. Reality corrects. The most chilling example of this is Richard and the Job. When Richard gets hired as a pizza delivery man and begins doing his job competently, reality begins to tear itself apart. The sky cracks. Buildings warp. The laws of physics lose their coherence. And the only solution is to get Richard fired, to restore him to his narrative function, to put the bumbling stay-at-home dad back in the narrative slot reserved for him. Richard is not lazy by nature, he is lazy by mandate. The universe has a slot labeled Richard Watterson, lovable oaf, domestic anchor, stay-at-home dad, and it enforces that slot with the full power of physical law. When Richard deviates from it, everything breaks, not as consequence or punishment, but as the universe correcting an error. The same way the void removes boring characters, the same way the signal degrades when the broadcast connection weakens. The universe maintains its story by force if necessary. And Richard knows this, somewhere. Not consciously. Richard is not Rob, he does not have access to the meta-awareness that explicit void contact provides. But he has tried to have a job in multiple episodes across the series, and something always goes wrong. Always. He has tried to be more, to contribute, to escape the role that has been assigned to him. And the universe has never once let him. What would it mean to love your family as much as Richard does? Not to see what your wife carries every day and wish you could share some of that weight? And to be physically, ontologically prevented from doing so? To have your best impulses systematically frustrated by a reality that has decided, without asking you, what you are for? That is Richard's tragedy. Not that he is lazy, that he tried and the world would not let him be anything else. Now let us apply the full framework to one more major aspect of the show that we have not yet addressed in this context. the mixed media aesthetic itself. Every character in Elmore is rendered in a different visual style. Gumball is two-dimensional. Darwin is two-dimensional but sometimes three-dimensional. Tina Rex is CGI. The Robinsons are puppet-like, with a physical solidity that separates them visually from the flat animated characters. Idaho is claymation. Thus, Sussy is a live-action chin filmed upside down with googly eyes attached. The backgrounds of the show are photographs. Real photographs, primarily of locations in and around London, England, where the show was produced. The characters exist on top of these photographs rather than inside animated worlds, which gives Elmore a tangible, physical quality that most animation lacks. And also, crucially, means that every character exists in a visual space that was not built for them. Bacalé has spoken about this as a deliberate choice, inspired by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and his desire for Elmore to feel real enough to visit. But in the context of the show's meta-narrative, the visual dissonance carries additional meaning. And every character looks different, not because Elmore is a diverse and eclectic place where different visual traditions coexist harmoniously. Every character looks different because they came from different places, different projects, different stylistic traditions that were never intended to sit beside each other. They were gathered, rejected and gathered, and placed in proximity to each other in a world built from real-world photographs precisely because none of them had a world of their own to belong to. The further you are from the Watterson family, the character group at the center of the narrative, the more visually alien you are. Gumball's immediate family is all two-dimensional, flat, soft, the kind of character design you would recognize as a cartoon protagonist. By the time you reach the outer edges of the supporting cast, you are in territory where the visual language is so different from the central characters that it creates genuine uncanny dissonance. Sussy, the live-action chin, is so visually incompatible with the animated world around her that she functions as a kind of standing rupture in the show's visual fabric. A constant reminder that the reality of Elmore is stitched together from incompatible pieces that should not work but do. And when the void begins consuming Elmore as in the Inquisition, the visual coherence comes apart in exactly the way you would predict. The different styles do not blend into static together. They separate. The CGI and the two-dimensional animation and the puppetry and the live-action photography peel apart from each other as the void pulls at the seams. But the unlikely harmony that held Elmore together, the miracle of all these mismatched visual traditions existing side by side, dissolves into its component parts, into the individual styles that came from different places and should not have been able to coexist at all. The ending of Gumball is not a cartoon apocalypse. It is a design philosophy coming undone. It is the accumulated compromise of all those visual choices unraveling simultaneously. And what is left is static. The same static Rob is made of. The same static Banana Barbara keeps painting. The same static the void has always been. Everything in the show is trying to tell you the same thing from a different angle. The show's visual design, its narrative structure, its character arcs, its meta-commentary, and its music and its silences and its running gags and its sudden moments of genuine pathos, all of it is pointing at the same truth. That existence is precarious, that belonging is not guaranteed, that the things you love exist only as long as someone loves them, and the moment they stop being loved, they begin to disappear. That is not a cartoon truth. That is the actual truth. And Gumball is one of the few shows that has looked at that truth clearly and decided to be funny about it anyway. Gumball is reckless and chaotic because, on some level he cannot consciously access, he understands that boring characters get deleted. His behavior is not simply a personality trait. It is an evolutionary adaptation to an environment that punishes stillness with erasure. He causes chaos because chaos is interesting. And interesting things continue to be watched. Darwin was transformed from a fish into a character because the story needed a sidekick. The universe reshaped reality to provide one. His personality, his optimism, his loyalty, his moral sensitivity, is precisely the set of traits a sidekick needs to function in the narrative. Nicole carries the family because the story collapses without a competent adult to anchor it. Her superhuman abilities exist because the plot requires her to be the safety net. Richard is cosmically constrained to laziness because the narrative needs a bumbling, stay-at-home dad, and the universe enforces this so stringently that when he tries to be productive in the job, reality begins tearing itself apart. He is not lazy by choice. He is lazy by narrative mandate. But Larry works 38 jobs because the story needs someone to populate every commercial location in Elmore. He is not a person with a remarkably strong work ethic. He is infrastructure. And the infrastructure cannot stop working because the infrastructure stopping means the town shuts down. Penny hid in a shell because the plot was not ready to reveal her true form until season 3. Her suppression was structured by the story. Her emergence was timed for dramatic effect. Banana Barbara can see the future because the future is already written. It has been storyboarded and animated and aired. Her paintings are not prophecy. They are the script, accessed through a mind that broke in exactly the right way to receive it. And Rob was erased because background characters do not matter to the story. He came back because conflict needs a villain. His entire identity was dictated by the narrative's requirements, and everything he experienced was the result of being treated as a resource for the plot rather than a person within it. The show knows this. It is not accidental that the characters who become most aware of the fictional nature of their world are the ones the plot treats most cruelly. Rob's awareness is inseparable from his victimhood. Understanding the system is not power in Elmore. It is a burden. The void will destroy everything if the truth becomes widely known, so the truth is actively suppressed. By the void, by the universe, by the reset, by the Shady Man, and now by Rob himself. There is a passage in the show's fan community that was originally written on the Gumball wiki, connecting Gumball's behavior to an academic paper by economist Robin Hanson called How to Live in a Simulation. The argument is that a person who somehow realized they were living in a simulation would exhibit certain behaviors. They would be self-serving. They would take reckless risks because the simulation could end at any moment. And they would try to be as interesting as possible because interesting simulations are less likely to be turned off. They would, in short, perform for an audience they could not see. This is Gumball entirely, described in academic language. He does not consciously know he is in a show, but his behavior is precisely calibrated to remaining watchable, to being the kind of protagonist an audience would not want to abandon. His chaos is survival, his selfishness is strategic. That his refusal to be boring is the most fundamental act of self-preservation available to him. Ben Bockelay has said that he has his own theory about what Elmore really is, a theory he considers the key to the show's meaning, and has declined to reveal it. He has suggested that it is not as dark as the fan theories tend to assume, and that it will be addressed in the movie. I find his reticence beautiful. Some questions deserve to be held open. Some mysteries gain their power from remaining unresolved, from inviting you to continue turning them over in the dark. But if I had to guess, and this is speculation, framed clearly as such, I think the movie will reveal that the show's universe is not merely fictional in the passive sense. But I think it will tell us something about the relationship between the characters and the people watching them, something about what it means when a story genuinely matters to the people receiving it. Something about whether the attention of an audience is purely extractive, consuming these characters for entertainment, or whether it is in some sense generative, whether watching with care is itself a form of keeping something alive. Banana Barbara cannot paint the future because there is static. But static is what Rob is made of, and Rob is the one who keeps Elmore going now. The static that was supposed to represent the end is the substance of the character who is determined to make sure the end does not come. Make of that what you will. Section 11. Unanswered questions and what comes next. We have covered a great deal of ground tonight, and I want to spend some time with the questions that remain genuinely open. The ones the revival series has not resolved, the ones the movie will presumably address, the ones that have been sitting in the fan community for years without a satisfying answer. The first is the question of the void's origins. We know what it does. We know how it functions. We know its role in the show's meta-narrative, but we do not know where it came from. Was it always there? Was it created? If so, by whom? The show has always presented the void as a fact of Elmore's existence, rather than a development within it. But the fact that the Shady Man has been operating with awareness of it for so long, and the fact that his van contains objects from other dimensions, suggests that there is a larger cosmology here that the show has been building toward and has not yet fully revealed. The second is the question of Miss Simeon. The show tells us she has been a teacher for 2 million years. 2 million years is not a joke. It predates recorded human history. It predates most of what we understand as civilization. Miss Simeon was grading papers before there were papers, presumably, before there were schools, before there was anything resembling the world the show depicts. She was a teacher in Elmore before Elmore existed. What does that mean? How does she fit into the show's cosmology? Is she, as one theory suggests, the original inhabitant of the world, the seed from which everything else grew? Or is she simply an ancient figure whose longevity the show uses for comic effect without intending the deeper implications? The show took a step in Season 7 toward revealing more about Miss Simeon's interior life. An episode apparently showed her home, her private habits, her actual relationship to the students she has spent millennia teaching. It was described by people who saw it as unexpectedly moving, suggesting that underneath the legendary grumpiness and the cosmic resentment, there is something more complicated. Someone who used her own money to buy laptops for her students, while everyone assumed the worst about her motives. Someone who has been defined by the role of villain for longer than most of us can conceptualize, but carrying that role with the same trapped fatalism that Rob carried his for the few years we watched him. There is an unexpected kinship there between Rob and Miss Simeon. Both cast as antagonists. Both more complex than their assigned roles allow them to appear. Both existing in a world that has decided what they are and refuses to update the assessment regardless of evidence. The third is the question of Darwin's actual nature. We discussed this earlier, but there is a specific aspect I want to return to. The show has never clearly resolved whether Darwin's consciousness is genuinely his or genuinely assigned. The revival series will presumably develop his relationship with Carrie, and explore what it means for two beings with such different relationships to time and mortality to love each other. But the deeper question, who Darwin would be if he had not been transformed, remains unaddressed, and I suspect it will remain unaddressed. Some questions are more valuable as questions. The fourth is the Wattersons' relationship to the Void's mechanics going forward. Rob is now the Guardian. He knows the truth. Gumball and Darwin are still unaware. Their awareness would trigger the Void. But the rewrite established that they are getting closer to figuring it out on their own. The plot holes are accumulating. The inconsistencies are becoming visible. How long can Rob maintain the concealment? And what happens, if not in the movie, then eventually when the protagonists finally know? The fifth, and perhaps the most personal, is the question of Elmore itself after everything ends. As the Inquisition presented an ending defined by static and loss. The revival has given us new episodes, new chapters, new layers of story. But the Void has not been defeated. Rob has been given the task of protecting Elmore when the show is eventually canceled for real, which means the cancellation is not a possibility but a certainty, simply one whose timing is unknown. Ben Bakale has spoken about an intended resolution. A movie is in development. Whether that movie gets made in the form he intends it, whether it reaches the audience in the way it needs to, whether it gets to be the full and proper ending he has been building toward, none of that is guaranteed. Art never is. The most honest thing the show has ever said about its own situation is Banana Barbera's flat 3 words: there is no future. Not because there is no future, but because the future cannot be painted, because it has not been written yet, because it is still being decided. What we know at this point is that Elmore is still there. The signal is still holding. The static has not consumed everything. Rob has the van. The Wattersons are still causing chaos. Gumball and Darwin are still looking for adventures in a world that is simultaneously a cartoon suburb and an existential battleground. And we are still watching. That last part matters. The show has been telling us since at least Season 3 that our attention is not passive, that watching is an act, that the audience is not separate from the story but woven into it, that our engagement is one of the things that determines whether the characters continue to exist. This is not a comfortable claim, and it puts responsibility on the viewer in a way that most shows would never dare. But it is also, I think, the most generous thing the show says. Because if our watching keeps Elmore alive, then the affection we bring to it, the care with which we examine its mysteries, the attention we pay to its characters, the conversations we have about what it means, all of that is not consumption. It is maintenance. It is a form of care for something that cannot care for itself. The void is us changing the channel, but the signal holding is us staying. Section 12. Goodnight, Elmore. We have been here for a while now, and I think it is time to bring this home. I want to end where we began, with a banana in a garage surrounded by paintings of things that already happened and things that have not happened yet. With a woman who broke open somehow and came out the other side with a gift and a wound that are the same thing. With static on a canvas where the future should be. The Amazing World of Gumball is, on its surface, a show about a blue cat who cannot stop causing problems. It is also one of the most sustained and honest meditations on the experience of existing in an uncertain world that has been committed to animation. Every mystery we discuss tonight, every dark implication and unsolved question, comes back to the same set of concerns that every human being carries to varying degrees at varying times. Are you real? Does your existence matter? What happens when the people who define you are not the people you would have chosen? What do you owe to a world that may not owe you anything? What is the difference between performing who you are and being who you are? And what becomes of you when the story you have been living is over? Rob asked all of these questions and was turned into a villain for his trouble. Nicole carries all of these questions and turns them into fuel that keeps her family fed and housed and safe. Darwin answers them by being the best person he knows how to be, even though he cannot be certain the person he is was chosen rather than assigned. Penny answers them by breaking out of the protective shell her family built and standing visible in the world without it, bearing every emotion in public. Gumball mostly refuses to answer them, which is its own kind of answer. Because refusing to confront the questions, choosing to live at the surface of things, choosing chaos and humor and constant forward motion rather than stillness, that is a response too. Not an enlightened one, not a brave one, but a thoroughly, recognizably human one. The show does not judge Gumball for it. It simply shows him running, episode after episode, from something he cannot name and would not know what to do with if he caught it. And Banana Barbara answers them by painting in a garage and wearing a bow to keep from peeling apart, and occasionally looking at a canvas that should show the future, but shows only static, and saying, in that flat and eerie voice, what she has come to understand. There is no future. Not a painted one. Not a predetermined one. Not a guaranteed one. Just this. Just right now. Just whatever we make of the present moment before it becomes one of the paintings on the wall. If you have made it to the end of this one, I am genuinely grateful. This video represents a lot of time and a lot of thought, and a genuine love for a show that I believe deserves this kind of sustained attention. If something here resonated with you, if there's a theory we explored that you want to discuss, or a question you have been carrying that I did not address, or a mystery you think deserves its own video, leave it in the comments. I read all of them. This community is one of the things that makes doing this feel worthwhile. If you are not already subscribed to Watterson Lore, this is the moment. Every subscriber keeps this channel going, and there is more to come. More deep dives into the corners of Elmore that casual viewing skips. More patient attention paid to the characters who deserve it. More long nights in the dark with a show that keeps giving. The longer you look at it, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you do not miss what is coming next. The signal is still holding. Elmore is still out there, and we get to watch. Good night. Sleep well.